Hello and welcome to our live stream for Tink and Wendy. This is a launch party for Tink and Wendy. Tonight we're going to be joined by author Kelly Ann Jacobson, who will be in conversation with Mary Manspeaker, who's the lead editor for Three Rooms Press. Tink and Wendy is a great new book. It is based on the story of Peter Pan, but it's a queer retelling. It asks the question, what if Tink was in love with both Peter and Wendy? So tonight we're going to welcome to the screen Kelly Ann Jacobson. So here's Kelly Ann, and a little bit about Kelly Ann. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Kelly Ann Jacobson is a prolific author, editor, and professor specializing in queer fiction. Her most recent books include the linked story collection and inventory of abandoned things, which was the winner of the 2020 Split Lip Chapbook Contest. And she's earned her PhD in fiction from Florida State University and teaches speculative fiction for Southern New Hampshire University. And also, what other university are you teaching with right now?
The University of West Alabama now.
All right. Okay, so welcome. And I'm so excited to have you here. How have you been feeling about Tink and Wendy? One of the things I wanted to bring up is just some of the great reviews you've been getting.
It's been wonderful. I mean, I've really been blown away by how amazing the reviews have been. I mean, it's really been nice to have it be noticed, and also just especially to a mainstream audience as well. It's really nice to see queer fiction get there always.
Oh, yeah. So here's just some of the things people have been saying about Tink and Wendy. Most anticipated books of October 2021 by Bustle. 8 must-read queer young adult books, LAMBDA Literary. School Library Journal, Book Riot, SheReads, Publisher Weekly, Foreword Reviews, Autostraddle. Everybody loves this book. So I'm so happy that you're here tonight. It's so exciting. We're going to welcome to the stage now, to the stream, Mary Manspeaker. She is a editor here at Three Rooms Press and helped with the editing of specifically Tink and Wendy. So, Mary, how do you feel about the launch of Tink and Wendy, about Tink and Wendy being out in the world?
Oh my God, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to have it out, to see like the response to it. Because I know, like, obviously to a lesser extent than an author spending like so much time with one text, even as an editor, like you spend time looking at it and thinking about it, and to have it like out in the world and get to see other people's responses to it is so exciting.
Right, it is. Tink and Wendy is now online for sale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also you can buy it directly here from this link tonight, bit.ly/buy Tink and Wendy. This will take you to our Three Rooms Press sales page, and go ahead and support your author, support Kelly Ann Jacobson. Support queer literature. And I think that you'll be very happy that you did. I'll be showing this throughout the show tonight. Also, if you are on YouTube or Facebook and you have any questions that you want to ask the author, after Mary and Kelly Ann converse for a little bit, then we're going to give your questions to the author. So go ahead and write your questions in the chat, and we'll be very happy to see you. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to Mary and Kelly Ann Jacobson, who will be in conversation. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you soon, Kat. Yeah, I mean, I got to work on this with you for a little bit last spring, but this is the first time we've had a chance to actually like talk.
How are you? Yeah, this is so great. Hello.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
But I guess we might as well start with talking about Peter Pan. I mean, why this source material?
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I feel like it's the best question and a question I don't have an answer to, which is so terrible because people ask me that. They're like, why did you do Peter Pan? And I don't really know. I mean, I've always liked the I've always liked Tinkerbell as a character, and I kind of used to look a little bit like Tinkerbell in my earlier years. And people sometimes, like, I had a job where people would call me Tinkerbell, and someone like gave me a little Tinkerbell bag because I had like very short, Hillary Clinton style, short blonde hair. And so I think that made me look a little bit Tinkerbell-esque. But I think I also just don't love the character of Peter Pan, and writing about things you don't love can be even better than things you do love. And I think I kind of just do not like the whole vibe of Peter. And I had a significant other, a partner, in high school who wanted to start this commune of artists, and I was supposed to be like the mother figure to take care of everybody. And that relationship did not work out, clearly. But that stuck with me. And later, when I actually became a writer, I always think about it, just that idea that people would write me off so easily and just assume I would have nothing to contribute besides that. I think that makes me feel very much like I would want to write about Wendy and Tinkerbell and not so much Peter Pan always. So maybe it was just like revenge. I don't know. But one day that idea just popped into my head. I like to do retellings and reimaginings. I like to read them and write them. And so, someday I just kind of thought about doing it, and then the book came out. I am not a planner in any way. And so I'm somebody who, as I'm writing, I'm just like, wait, what just happened? Everything surprises me. Sometimes even like the ending, like everything I'll really be surprised by. And I think this story was like that. I sort of went into it with like an emotion and a drive and no plan whatsoever. And this is what happened. So.
Yeah, totally. I actually hadn't heard that story before, like that personal experience about, that's so funny.
That was infuriating, but like good that it happened. So I could be like, nope. But really very Wendy-esque experience. For sure.
Yeah, totally. And it really God, there have been so many reimaginings of Peter Pan specifically, I think, even when I was growing up, but most of them about Peter Pan, and none of them engaging with Wendy was just supposed to be mother to all of these orphan boys, which is wild.
Yeah, I know. And I actually didn't read the whole original Peter Pan. I read pieces of it. The problem is I try not to read things that are too closely associated with something I'm writing, because then it's too easy to slip into the tropes. And if I'm writing a reimagining, it's because I want to reimagine it and I want to break away from what happened before in order to tell a story about what's happening to us now in our current society. And so I would read pieces of it if I needed to know the answer to a question or, some detail. If I really needed it, I would read a scene, but I didn't read the whole thing. But then my dad sent it to me for my birthday, which is great because it's this beautiful, illustrated version. And I was kind of paging through it earlier today and reading through it. And yeah, I didn't realize that originally Peter Pan kept asking Wendy to come back to do his house cleaning every year. That was the premise that he had for her, is come back and do the house cleaning. And then she has a daughter who's also supposed to do the house cleaning. And I was like, makes me so angry. Thank goodness I wrote a book about it already.
Thank goodness. Yeah, and I had actually seen you mention that you did an interview that's on our website right now with Merit, who used to be an intern with us, and it was fantastic. But I saw that you mentioned that you made the choice not to engage too deeply with the source material itself, or even with the Disney movie.
Yeah.
Which is
I was like, I don't care what's been done. No, I do care, but it's I know the general story enough to know what I don't like about it. And I currently obviously live in our society. And so I have enough I want to say about that I didn't want to let it sway me too much or have that story take over, especially with the amount that Peter Pan is focused on it. I very much didn't want this to be about Peter Pan. And I like reading, I read all the Goodreads reviews, and some of them, I'll like, and some of them I don't, but I enjoy reading all of them. And I do listen to the criticism on Goodreads by any reviewer that I can find. I do read and listen to. And one of the things I've definitely noticed is people saying this has been really surprising. It doesn't focus on Peter Pan. And usually it's because they love that about it, but it definitely is very different.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know that I would have guessed that reading this, that it came from a place of because it's so much not about Peter, that it came from a place of I'm angry about this.
Yeah.
But I think that's, it is such a generative place, or it can be. I write poetry, and some of the fastest drafts I've ever written were because I read something and I was like, actually, I disagree so vehemently with everything in this.
So much that I'm going to write Peter Pan out of this. That's how mad I am about it. Yeah, that was my like weird indirect way. And then like, obviously I fell in love with the other characters. And so they really just took over. But I also, it's interesting. I was thinking about it earlier, like think that I see myself in Tinkerbell and Wendy like split exactly down the middle. I'm like half one of them and half the other one of them. And I do think a lot of writers like, you have to pull something from yourself, even if you're nothing like a character. If you can like associate with them or pull something from your personality in some way, it can make you feel like you are them. But I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, I think I might be like both of those characters, but definitely 0% Peter Pan. And so even more so explains why I was less drawn to writing about him and more interested in just exploring those kind of like two aspects of sort of me, or, you know, just people in general, I guess. But
yeah, I'm struck also by thinking about sort of a resistance to writing toward source material and choosing to write instead like against it or toward your own story or our own story or a modern story.
yeah.
And sort of how that speaks to me too about like particularly writing queer stories and like resistance to writing stories for queer characters that are not actually about them or are the stories that we always see told about them.
Yeah, and it frustrates me because I know, like, you know, agents will say things like, oh, I've seen so many retellings. There's just so many retellings of this. And I kind of get frustrated because I want to say, like, really, where's the one that I would associate with? And
Right.
so that kind of also, clearly I sound like a very angry person, but it makes me frustrated because, you know, that's why I started writing queer young adult in the first place. I was not intending on writing young adult at all. I was very much intending to be just an adult literary fiction writer. And that's how I started out. That's, you know, what I was trained to do. But I would go to talk to queer young adults and they told me, you know, we feel like we don't see ourselves in books when we go in Barnes and Noble. And this is back before there's been this like huge surge of queer books, which is awesome. And in the mainstream, which is great too. In small presses, mainstream, everywhere, there's this huge wave, which is great, but there wasn't back then. It was like just beginning, and a lot of that came with Wattpad and self-publishing, and then kind of like moved into you know, some of the other venues. But back then there really weren't a lot, and so they were very frustrated. And I'm just like I want to solve everyone's problems, and so I heard that and I was like, I'll change my whole career and this is all I'm going to do. And it basically has been like 8 books I wrote under a pen name for a while, and now I'm just writing under my name. But it's been a lot, and I'm intending to continue to do it because I think it makes a difference, and I would like to make a difference with my writing if I can. And so yeah, anyway, that's what got me started on it.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think I find so often authors become so fascinated by telling stories where they see something is missing, like
Yes.
where they see a gap and they're like, or have experience like, I grew up not seeing myself in this way or in that way.
Yeah. And it's like, fill the void. If I can do it for someone else. And, you know, I love these messages. I get messages from people and they tell me about their kids. And I feel like that is so meaningful to me when they say like, you know, my kid saw me reading this, or, you know, my kid's reading this and it's really making a difference to them. And I just think like I would have loved to have that book when I was a kid. And so that keeps me going, even when the writing life can be really hard. I'm like, I'm going to make a difference in somebody else's life so they don't have that experience like I did. And so, yeah, it's very meaningful to me. I mean, I do a lot of events for young adults. I do a lot of free talks for young adults. I basically will travel wherever I can afford to go to talk to them. And I often just will do like Q&A. I'll just say like, ask me any question and I'll give you an honest answer, because I think it can be nice to just see somebody doing something that you want to do and just get to ask them like, what's life like? What's adulthood like, you know, in the world? And I had, one time a young adult asked me about, you know, being pansexual or bisexual, and just asking like, what is that like as an adult? Do you feel like you have to hide that? You know, how much are you hiding that in your daily life and things like that? And, you know, I just gave her an honest answer and I told her basically it was going to be okay. But yeah, it's very meaningful to me to get to do that and to have that be so closely linked with my writing, which I obviously care about and love so much. So.
Yeah, I'm also interested, maybe this is backtracking a little, but to talk more about like craft approaches to the book too. When you're approaching characters that people that like are in the cultural imagination, how did you think about expanding them or turning them into like creating a Tink and a Wendy that's each half of you?
I mean, I try not to ever think about anyone reading my books. And that's actually been a luxury of people not reading my books for so long when I wrote them. I mean, think about how many books I've published at, like, multiply that by 3, and that's how many I've written. And I really am somebody that just loves writing. I've written books since I was 5 years old. Like, literally, I published my first book when I was 5 in my school library. Shout out to Gwynedd Square Elementary. They had a great program where they would turn our books into these little published books. And so I've always done it. And therefore, I don't really expect anything from it. Like, anything that's come from it has just been extra added wonderful bonus. But I would write, you know, my books anyway, even if no one read them. I just love to write so much, and I love to just explore. And I think that helps me a lot because I don't ever feel tied to doing anything that anyone would expect. I just write whatever I feel I want to write, and that's speaking to me. And so, yeah, luckily I don't worry about that too much. I don't know if that's always the best approach to writing. It will take a decade. I don't know. I mean, but it's my method that I've gone with. So luckily it's been working out now so far. But
yeah, and I mean, I think everyone has that, like, find what works eventually. I don't know. I think at least in the process of writing what is important to you, and, like, knowing that eventually, like, people like you will get to read it.
Yes.
Can feel like enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm also interested. You specialize specifically in both queer and speculative fiction, and we've talked a lot about what it means to you to write queer fiction. Can you talk about what speculative means in your work?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I love a good dragon. I'm very much into the fantasy tropes, science fiction tropes. I mean, when I do science fiction, it's almost more fantasy-esque. I'm definitely not a scientist or mathematician in any way. There have been a few books where I'll just ask my partner, like, so explain how time travel maybe could work hypothetically, and just, like, type it right into the book. There's no way I'll ever understand. So I'm not that kind of science fiction writer, but I just love it because there are no rules. Like, you can make up anything that you want, and that freedom is important to me. And I like to write basically like social experiments through fantasy or science fiction. So I'll say, like, you know, what if, like, there was a whole planet of, like, people who were half human and half dragon, and everyone was intersex, and these rules, and I'm, like, coming up with all these rules, and and I'm like, okay, go. And then that's the book, you know? And so you just get to, like, see what would happen, like, how much would gender performance, you know, take over or not, you know. Anyway, I like to explore things like that. And so that's kind of like where speculative and gender come in for me. I was a women's studies major. They didn't have gender studies when I was in undergrad, or not at my school. So I was a women's studies major. But I started off as English, kind of drifted, and I've always been interested in queer theory. And so I kind of, like, pair them together a lot, but I love speculative. I love to teach speculative fiction. I mean, everything is so different. I get the whole range of subgenres, and literary and not literary. And so I really enjoy just getting to read those stories. Who wouldn't, right? Love to read about, like, there's a fairy, there's a dragon, and just all these really cool ideas that my students have. I love it. I love to do interactive activities. So I'll do a lot of, like, we're going to just now have a battle in class and everyone has life points. And, you know, I do, like, dialogue games and stuff like that. A lot of role playing. I just like to be imaginative. And I think it's a way to break out of the sort of norms that we have in our society, or just certain expectations. It's like you can just be free of all of that through genre fiction. That's why I love it so much.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of interesting ways that queer theory and, like, speculative writing pair, especially like Tink and Wendy, the urge to write back into something that, like, history, something that has, like, sorry, my cat just flopped onto my lap. But writing back into a history that something is missing from, writing back into a story that is so ubiquitous that something is missing from, but also, like you said, that, like, getting to just start from a question. Like, I'm curious what your like, influence as far as writers are, but I was going to say first, I've been going back and reading a lot of Ursula Le Guin.
I was just going to say, and I love Ursula Le Guin so much. Yeah. Heart of Darkness was on my reading list. You know, unfortunately, I have not read nearly as much as I would like to, both because of my kids and because of my PhD program taking over my whole life, and then just being so tired because I read 160 books in a year, and it was very tiring. But yeah, I love her so much. She made it onto my list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I was thinking of her, especially like Left Hand of Darkness, that starting from a question of just like, what if someone from like an Earth-like society went to a place where they didn't have static gender?
Yes. Oh yeah,
Like,
left hand darkness. Duh. Oh my
yeah.
God, my brain is not working today. Yes, exactly. Those are the types of questions that I love. That's just exactly like what I love to write. And she's an influence, Margaret Atwood, people like that who are really, especially pairing literary with speculative in these ways where people kind of even are wondering like, what is this? I like to write things that people go, what is happening here? That's really what category is it? It's not fitting anything. And it's like, probably my writing life would be easier if I didn't do that, but I wouldn't enjoy it. I have to be in like the middle of every lane and just not clearly be fitting into everything. And that's why I love Three Rooms Press so much. I just feel like you guys take chances on things and like you're like, this is a really cool idea, we're going to support this in a way that sometimes it can be really hard to find. You just clearly believe in every project that you have. I don't know if you heard, because I think this was before your time, but how much of a love story this pairing has been. I don't know if this has ever been told to you or not, but I actually met Kat and Peter at an AWP like a bazillion years ago, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago or something. And I think I was writing, I don't know if I was even writing young adult by then, but they gave me one of their young adult queer books and I reviewed it. Then I ended up going to New York and we had coffee. And then like every year I'd be like, here's a book I wrote, please publish it. And they're like, very nice. Okay, no, but in a nice way, a very nice way. I mean, it wasn't that many books that I sent, but it was a few books. And I was just hopeful because it's like, I knew like what they're doing is something I want to be a part of. And it's really important to me to find people that support me in what I'm writing, especially when I'm writing queer fiction, but also just being in the middle of so many lanes. I just want to know that that's a safe space and that I'm very supported in that space. And I've seen them do that again and again for writers. And so they were like my dream publisher, literally. And so I couldn't believe it when they finally took one of my books. I was like, oh my God, it was like a dream come true. I kind of like almost fainted. I was very happy. I'm very excited to be working with them because I believe in them and love their work. And so it was a really exciting moment for me, like dream come true.
Yeah, it was before my time that you first met Peter and Kat, but I came into the press. I'd been there for 6 months, 9 months at the time, and got this manuscript passed to me, and I was just like, I love it. Let's do it.
Yay. I know. And then also with that final scene, I would not have been able to have this book the way it is without you. It was like my favorite scene now. She had me add a scene and I think it's like the best scene. I'm so happy about it. And yeah, I loved working with you so much. And I feel like it's really important when you can really trust somebody and know that they really love your book and they're going to do what's right for it. And I'm very much that kind of writer. Like if I can tell somebody really loves my project and they're like, you need to do X, I believe them. It might be in a different way sometimes than what they suggest, though not in your case, but sometimes it might be. But it's like if they're highlighting something that they're noticing, it's important, to listen to that because, they believe in my project and they're trying to help me make it as good as it can be. And so I really enjoyed that process so much. I loved working with you.
Yeah, I mean, I loved working with you too. I think I get to be a special relationship when you both have like a vision for something that matches up.
Yes.
And yeah, like there are so many voices commenting on everything, and so much of writing especially is about finding like, okay, these are the people that share a vision with me, that love the same, like that will love this work. And like that doesn't mean like always won't have suggestions for it, but those suggestions come from a place of I see this and I want it to be what we can make the best it can be together. Because like writing is also not just solitary, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know it's weird. I feel like it's interesting when I talk to my students about that because they're at the very beginning stage where they're just like writing the first book, and I think about that and I'm like, you have this whole writing life ahead of you that people aren't even aware of, like going to festivals, although maybe not so much with the pandemic and everything, but going to festivals, talking to people, meeting readers, Q&A, like doing all these book launch things. Like this is what's so fun. Like this is the other half of it that sometimes it takes a while to get to see. And I really enjoy this aspect of it, that I just enjoy being a writer and getting to go and talk to people and meet people and do this kind of thing. So it's really nice, but it kind of feels so different than that, like sitting alone writing a book, not knowing if anyone will ever read it. And then sometimes looking back and going, I'm very glad no one read that book. That was horrible. It has happened, let me tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually wanted to touch on something you said before about writing stuff that like is not absolutely one thing, is not absolutely another thing. Because I think that also gives the reader the opportunity to, and sort of makes them a little bit approach it for what it is, like
Yes.
on its own level.
Absolutely. I think the like parts that are the history of Neverland are really where I challenge the expectations of young adult fiction for sure. But it's like they were important to me. And I love that they kind of tell a secret story, because the other sections tell a very open story. Like the story is there. You don't know what the ending is going to be, but the story is clear. But I like that like Godmother Anne's story is hidden within those sections. And if you read them or reread them, you can see more about her in the way those sections are written than like the other ones where the story is just a little bit more clear. And so I just love them. I love them, even though I know they're a little bit challenging in some ways, because on the surface, it just seems like, okay, this is like an encyclopedia entry about something. But then when you look deeper, you're like, this is actually telling a person's, well, a fairy's story, you know, over the course of the book. So yeah, I love those kinds of things. And I love them when I read books, like non-traditional points of view and just things that are really not what you'd expect. That's what I love.
Yeah, and I love those sections too. I think getting to not just like complicate the characters, but to complicate like what is happening in Neverland, what is the situation there, how is it set up, what is the mythology, is so interesting.
Yes.
And I also saw along with that, I think you said in that same interview with Merritt, that sort of like switching between those things is a natural writing style for you. So like, were they written like not just like one thread and another thread? They were actually written.
So it was then and now, and then I went back and added the entries, because I feel like Godmother Anne, as I wrote, took on more meaning to me than I really had realized initially she would have. And also like the thread of mothers and like what that means. And I love the entry that's about mothers. And I feel like that kind of ties together some of the questions that I ask in the book about motherhood and just what that role means. And just also like just thinking about the original and the movie as well. But yeah, then it's like she kind of took on a different meaning. And then I was like, wait, I want to thread that in. And so then I like went back, and I feel like I had like more to say about Neverland as well that I just hadn't really realized I had to say, because I don't plan anything. And so I got to the end, I'm like, wait, this would be so cool. Now I got to go back, put them in. And so, but then I wrote the entries, but they weren't necessarily all paired up with sections. So I put them in, and then I added more where I felt like I needed to make that arc happen. I went and like added a few more in so that it would really work as like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it would just tie together with the chapters. So that was very intentional for sure, to have the meanings like tied together clearly. Yeah, that was definitely, I love to do stuff like that. It's very natural for me to write like 100 points of view. Like I would just have a different point of view for every section of every book if people would let me publish that, because I just am a very kind of like scattered and distracted writer and person. And I think my life currently has made me just unable, it just doesn't fit with me to have one sustained story. I need to have like pieces that are manageable. And also I love the puzzle aspect of then at the end getting to be like, these 250 point of views I wrote all culminate in this one thing at the end. How did I know that was going to happen? I didn't know. I'm shocked. But it does all come together at the end somehow. I don't know how. Magic. I don't know. Fairy dust.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, like, I think without those history sections, it is still like a lovely story, and it is a complicated love story and all that comes with that. But it really is in those histories that you add that thread of like, what is motherhood and womanhood, and what like this sort of, I mean, they are literally a history. Like it is the culture that surrounds that, and getting to pull that into question too.
Yeah, I enjoyed writing them for sure. That I could do all day long. I love it. I was going to write 250 entries and call it a book, and there we go. I would do it all day. Yeah, I definitely do enjoy doing that. So I also appreciated that was something that spoke to you guys too, because I was afraid. I was like, they're going to ask me to take them out, and I just can't. I was like, no, we're actually going to put a beautiful border around them and emphasize them even more. And like, you just get me. You do.
Yeah, and that was Kat in the post. She was like, you know what?
So I can show everybody what it looks like here. Like this, so beautiful.
I'm gonna come on back and yeah, we've been having such a good time. We're talking about Tink and Wendy, which is a new novel from Kelly Ann Jacobson. And thank you so much, Mary, for talking with her. We're going to bring you back up a little bit in just a few minutes, but I have a couple things I'm going to go ahead and do with Kelly. First of all, we have a couple of questions. One was we kind of covered. Was it hard to find a publisher as a writer of queer fiction?
Oh my gosh. So not like, luckily I found Three Rooms Press. It's so wonderful. I do think it's becoming less difficult. It's been interesting. I feel like my whole writing life has been over that change. Like that I've watched that happen over these like 10 years. When I first started writing, nobody knew what to do with queer fiction. I mean, when I first got started, my first book ever was published as erotica, and all it had in it was a kiss. But like that publisher actually, thank goodness, was willing to publish my book, but they didn't know what to do with it. And so if they didn't know what to do with it and they were willing to publish it, you can imagine what everyone else was like. It was very difficult. I think people didn't think it would sell. And I don't know. I don't know if it would have or not in the mainstream at that time. I don't know. It's been tough, you know, it's been hard, but I've also like been lucky to get to watch that change and just get to see, I'm talking to young writers who just don't even know that that would be difficult. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's what you want for later, to have it be like, why would that ever have been hard? Like, why wouldn't people read that? It's like, that's amazing. And I've witnessed that for sure.
Absolutely. Now, this is from Eric. I read in your autobiography when you were 5, you were Tiger Lily for Halloween.
Hi, Dad. That's my dad. Thanks,
Aww.
Dad. Oh God, is there a picture? I feel like there's a picture somewhere.
Yeah. So, he has a photo.
Oh no, I was just kidding. I hope that he doesn't, but I have no idea.
Okay.
Did our Halloween costumes when I was 5 inspire this book that I wrote when I was 30 at the time? No, that was not my. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for that question.
That's funny. Also, Susan Fisher remarked on how much she loves your energy and enthusiasm.
Thank you.
And as do we. Now, I was wondering, would you like to read a little bit from TINK and Wendy?
I would love to. Yes, I would love to.
Okay.
And I checked this section with Mary. I was like, do you think it's okay if I read this? Because it is a little further in the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing I did want to remark on is this brilliant cover is done by Victoria Black, who's a brilliant cover designer. And I just love it. I think it captures everything about the magic of this book. So let's go ahead and hear you read then.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I did check this section with Mary because it's a little further into the book. It's page 78. So I was like, okay, is this all right? But we both love this section so much. And so I'm going to go for it. So I'll just give a little bit of context. You know, I'm sure you guys know, having read the little blurb or whatever, if you haven't already read the book. This is, so Peter Pan and Tinkerbell are in our modern day society. They've met Wendy and the other darlings who are living in upstate New York, and they're kind of like living with them, which Tinkerbell definitely thinks is a bad thing. She would like to go back to Neverland and bring Peter Pan because Peter Pan can't live forever if he's not in Neverland, and she cares about Peter Pan, and so she wants him to go back. In this section, there's this guy named Paul. You don't see him a whole lot in the book, but he comes in to ask Wendy if she'll go to prom with him or like this, winter ball. And she tells him like, no, there's actually like this other girl who really wants to go with you. And then he leaves is kind of like the context of this section. That was nice of you, Tink said as she sat down next to her. Really nice. I don't know a lot of girls who would give up a date to a dance for a friend. Mary isn't a friend, Wendy said. I barely know her, but it was the right thing to do. And besides, I didn't want to go with Paul or any other boy who's in love with another girl. I want to go with someone who likes me or with no one at all. I'm not afraid of being alone. You don't have to be alone, Tink said. There are lots of people who like you. The girls sat there on the porch for a while, listening to the creatures burrowing and creeping and stalking in the darkness. A fox slid into the light from the porch and then back out, becoming just another shadow in a shadow world. Tell me about where you're from, said Wendy. Oh, I should mention they've completely lied to the darlings about where they're from. Tell me about where you're from, said Wendy. Tink had the feeling that she was sad, but not about the dance. All right. Tink searched her memory for a detail she could share, just one small thing that wouldn't sound ludicrous to a girl in Wendy's position. Back where I'm from, the trees are the most wonderful trees you've ever seen. They're taller than any tree here in America and have twice as many branches and are perfect for climbing no matter how grown you are. All of the leaves are in the shape of hearts, and when you pick a leaf and give it to someone, it means you like them. You're giving them your heart, Wendy said softly. I like that. She seemed to be studying Tink, her expression as intent as when she had read Shakespeare. What lines were written on her face, Tink wondered, and what lines were folded up like a note and buried where Wendy couldn't find them. Tink had always found the leaf tradition silly. Only little boys would come up with such a way of expressing their feelings, and yet she had bristled when Tiger Lily had given Peter a leaf after he rescued her at Marooner's Rock. Tink needn't have worried, since Peter had later dropped the leaf into the bonfire, but now she wondered if it was an inability to love that had made him so insensitive, or if it was just an inability to love anyone but the right person. There had also been the incident with her own leaf offering, but she preferred not to dwell on that. Look. Wendy bent down further and then came up with a leaf from the step below her feet. The leaf, perfectly shaped as a heart, was recently fallen and therefore red and unblemished. It's the perfect one. Back in Neverland, the boys had mostly used the leaves as fuel for their bonfires. Now, Tink felt like the single leaf in Wendy's hand, blades boldly waving in the breeze, was brighter than any flame. Were the words in her heart showing on her face? Was that why Wendy kept staring at her? Wendy held the leaf by the stem and then lifted it to Tink. Here, you can have it. Tink stared at the leaf. Her cheeks burned, and she felt she could not move, not even her lips to make a joke or her fingers to take the offering so carelessly given. Perhaps Wendy, a girl of the real world, had not understood the gravity of what Tink had said about their tradition. Perhaps she had understood exactly. Wendy moved closer. Tink's hand rose. There you are, said John's voice behind them, and Wendy dropped the leaf. Tink moved to catch it, but the red heart disappeared into the darkness beyond the porch light and was gone. Peter has a surprise for you. Michael, who had come to fetch Wendy too, took his older sister by the hand and led her inside. Tink, following behind them, mused on what had just occurred. Could Wendy and could Tink, was it possible? And what would Peter say, and how would they? Peter stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by piles upon piles of leaves. When Wendy entered the room, he scooped up 2 handfuls and released them into the air, where they caught a little wind and drifted slowly down on top of Wendy's head. Peter, Wendy exclaimed, you've made a mess of the house. But she was laughing, and the boys too. Silly Peter, naughty Peter, fun Peter. Tink scowled. Peter took 2 more fistfuls of leaves and presented them to Wendy, who put out her hands and let the leaves rain down into her palms and then the floor. Perhaps Wendy had not understood. Perhaps she had understood exactly. Go to the winter ball with me? Peter asked. Oh, Peter, Wendy said, I would, but no buts. Peter said, no excuses. Look, I've even gotten you a dress. Michael ran to the closet and returned holding a long plastic bag that trailed on the floor behind him. Inside the bag, flattened and wrinkled, was a gaudy pink dress with puffy sleeves and a lace collar. Tink wrinkled her nose. Oh, Peter, Wendy said again, but she was laughing. I can't wear something like that. Peter took the bag from Michael and threw it behind him, where it billowed to the floor and was trampled by Michael's excited feet. I don't care if you wear a trash bag, Peter said, but you'll go with me, won't you? Please say you will, Wendy, or I'll be ever so sad. Please, Wendy, said little Michael. All right, you win, I will, she said. She didn't look at Tink, hadn't made eye contact with her since they came inside. Hooray! The boys whooped and danced around Wendy, throwing leaves in the air and letting them fall on her head. She laughed and caught some of the leaves, releasing them again, so they showered on the heads of the boys. The next morning, Tink found the eldest darling at work in the kitchen with Nana, like a Christmas tree skirt curved around her feet. No one else was within hearing distance, so Tink grabbed a piece of buttered toast off the pile and asked between bites, So, you and Peter, the dance? Right. Wendy washed a plate, her hands like 2 carp leaping. Tink wondered if the tips of her fingers were pruny or whether they were as soft as the skin of her arms where Tink had touched her that morning when they made breakfast. It'll be fun. Of course it will, Tink said. She picked up a tea towel, but there was nothing to dry. Peter always has fun. Wendy was still washing the plate, or rather rewashing it, and the bubbles covered her hands like a layer of foam on a pond. There's more to him than that, she said softly. Oh, really? Tink's voice was louder. Because you're such an expert on Peter Pan, you know him so well? I know he's more than you give him credit for, Wendy said. Tink snorted. The tea towel had become a twisted thing in her hands. I give him exactly the credit he's earned. I could tell you stories, but here she stopped. Tink dropped her left hand, allowing the tea towel to spiral into a long tail, and threw it on the counter. Never mind. Whatever he is, you'll find out yourself soon enough. Tink, it's just a dance. I'm going to my cottage, Tink said as she crossed the kitchen. I don't want to be disturbed. Tink, but she was already at the door to the backyard, slamming it. The sound of a plate breaking against a metal basin echoed behind her. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kelly Ann. That was great.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring back Mary, and thank you again so much for Oh, wait, we have another question here. Let's see this. When you started writing this book, did you already know exactly how you wanted the love triangle to end? Did their relationship change at all during the writing process?
It's a really good question. I don't think I knew anything. Like, I think I just like put them into the world and let them go. And I don't think I knew where it was going to go. I mean, looking back, like probably would have known that that's the direction that would have taken. I don't want to say too much about the ending, just I don't want to give anything away. But I think that's a really good question, and I do think that looking back at the beginning of the book and sort of some of the things that happen, I feel like you can kind of see some of the end come to life through that for sure.
It's kind of like if you're in a love triangle, you don't know how that's going to end up either.
Exactly.
So there you go. So
yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you, Mary, for editing this book. It was just incredible to be able to be a part of this and to have this whole thing happen. And thank you for your persistence. I want to personally just say something right now. We get a lot of people who submit a manuscript to us, and maybe it doesn't work for us right at that time. But if you're a writer, you're going to write and write and write because that's what you do. So please, if you've ever submitted a manuscript and it doesn't work, submit another one. Keep going. We're growing, you're growing, and the whole thing is a beautiful, landscape that we can all be a part of if the right thing comes along. So Kelly Ann, I'm so glad that you stuck with it. I really appreciate it.
I really do.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. And remember, this book that we've been talking about is Tink and Wendy, which is a queer retelling of Peter Pan's story that is for anyone who's ever wondered if there might have been more to the story of Tinkerbell and the rest of the Peter Pan legend. And it is now available everywhere. It's a young adult novel for age 16 and up. It's $14, and it's just beloved. I really think you should definitely check it out if you have any interest whatsoever in Tink and Wendy, Peter Pan, what happens? All right, so thanks again, and we'll see you all later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.